The Israel-Hamas war has entered its 14th day. It has already claimed thousands of lives and the death toll continues to surge. Sirens were heard in Tel Aviv again as the war intensifies. Hamas terrorists reportedly continue to fire rocket barrages. Israel says so far there have been no reports of damage or casualties from the latest Hamas rocket strikes. The Israeli Defence Forces say they have attacked over 100 operational Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip. They say they have destroyed tunnel shafts, munition warehouses and dozens of headquarters. Israel says it eliminated a terrorist who was in the Hamas naval force and took part in the October 7th attack. Israeli Defence Forces continue their onslaught against Hamas. Burning projectiles were again seen illuminating the darkened Gaza skyline on Thursday. Several fires were also seen burning in the distance in Gaza City. Israel has put the Gaza Strip's 2.3 million people under siege as it continues bombardment of the Hamas targets. A massive explosion took place near Nasser Hospital in Gaza's Khan Yunis. A state of panic ensued immediately after the explosion as people ran for refuge outside the hospital. The hospital was already treating several injured Palestinians from another strike in Khan Yunis. Earlier, 4 people were reportedly killed and several wounded in an airstrike on a house in the area. More than 3,500 people have been killed in Gaza since Israel launched its campaign against Hamas. A newly released dashcam video shows Hamas firing at people at the site of the Nature Party Music Festival. That was among the first targets of the Hamas attack on October 7th. In the video, Hamas terrorists could be seen shooting at fleeing festival goers. Thousands had attended the music festival. At least 260 people were killed and dozens were taken hostage. The latest satellite imagery shows that a number of Palestinians are taking shelter in schools and hospitals around Gaza City. Last week, Israel ordered the more than 1 million Palestinians in North Gaza to evacuate. This was to avoid being hit in attacks on Hamas strongholds there. The displaced Palestinians face a worsening humanitarian crisis. Over 100 trucks are lined up at the Rafah border crossing between Egypt and Gaza. They're waiting to enter Gaza and deliver humanitarian aid. The World Health Organization says 5 trucks of medical supplies are also at the border ready to enter Gaza. The delivery of aid will be the first after Israel imposed a total blockade on the Gaza Strip after the October 7th attack. Rafah is the only border crossing not controlled by Israel, but it has been out of operation since the first days of the conflict. 2.3 million Gazans are living without electricity and fuel, and their supply of food and water are fast depleting. According to reports, many Gazans are down to 1 meal a day and are consuming salty or dirty water. Gaza's health ministry pleaded with gas stations to give fuel to hospitals. Doctors say they only have hours of fuel left. Power has reportedly been shut off at most of the hospitals already, and the medical staff are using mobile phones for light. Egypt and Israel are still negotiating the entry of fuel for hospitals. Earlier, the Israeli military said that Hamas had stolen fuel from UN facilities. Tel Aviv wants assurances that it won't happen with the new fuel shipments. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel will deal harsh blows to its enemies. In a meeting with the brigade at the border with Gaza, Netanyahu said Israel is going to win with full force. Israeli troops are expected to launch a ground offensive against Hamas soon. Israeli Defence Minister Yaov Gallant also met infantry troops gathered at the Gaza border. He said that they will soon see the Palestinian enclave from inside. This suggests that the ground invasion is nearing. Israeli security officials have signaled their readiness. They say they will be far more comprehensive and ferocious than during any previous conflict with Hamas. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. He said Gaza needs aid at a scale and on a sustained basis. Guterres also called on Hamas to release hostages and asked Israel to give unrestricted access to aid. In a rare Oval Office address, US President Joe Biden called on Americans to unite behind Israel and send Tel Aviv billions of tax dollars. He said that the United States must remain a beacon to the world and a threat to all enemies of democracy. According to reports, Biden will ask Congress for $14 billion in new spending for Israel and $10 billion for humanitarian aid. The US president has also pledged $100 million for humanitarian aid in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. Biden's address came about 20 hours after returning from a whirlwind trip to Israel. The trip was to show solidarity after the Hamas attack. The Pentagon says it's sending military aid to Israel. This includes 2 Iron Dome missile defense systems that the US had previously bought from the country. A Pentagon spokesperson said that artillery, ammunition and other categories of critical equipment will be flown over to Israel in the coming days. Meanwhile, the Israeli Defence Ministry released videos of a shipment of US armored vehicles that landed in the country. The Israeli forces say that the shipment carried the first batch of vehicles aimed at replacing the Israeli military cars damaged in the fighting against Hamas. After Joe Biden, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak visited Israel in a show of solidarity. Sunak said that it was important that the conflict between Israel and Hamas didn't escalate to other parts of West Asia. The British Prime Minister later flew to Saudi Arabia to meet Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Jordan's foreign minister said that the country fears the worst was yet to come in the Gaza war, with no signs of success in efforts to de-escalate. He added that Jordan would confront a mass displacement of Palestinians that results in demographic or geographic changes to the region. The current conflict has stirred long-standing fears in Amman, which is already home to a large population of Palestinian refugees and their descendants. Jordan fears that a wider conflict would give Israel the chance to expel Palestinians en masse from the West Bank. Tensions also continue to simmer at Israel's border with Lebanon. In northern Israel, sirens warned of incoming rockets and sent Israelis running to bomb shelters. The IDF says that at least 20 rockets and an anti-tank missile had been fired from Lebanon yesterday. The Israeli border village of Manara was struck with at least 2 anti-armor missiles. Israel says that its forces were retaliating with artillery. Hundreds of protesters clashed with Lebanese security forces in a Beirut suburb near the US Embassy. This was during demonstrations in support of Gaza. Demonstrators holding Palestinian flags took down a security wall and cut a barbed wire barrier near the US Embassy. Riot police fired dozens of tear gas canisters and water cannons to disperse the protesters. Hundreds of protesters rallied in New York City's Times Square. They were demanding the release of hostages taken by Hamas during its October 7th attack. The protesters vowed to stand with Israel and fight back against Hamas. The Israeli ambassador to the UN was also present at the rally. The ambassador criticized UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' planned visit to the Rafah border crossing in Egypt. Dozens protested outside the Israeli embassy in Santiago in Chile in support of Palestinians in Gaza. They chanted slogans against Israel and said it was committing genocide in the Gaza Strip. Thousands have been marching in many cities worldwide over the past few days as Israel intensifies its airstrikes at Gaza. In other top stories, Canada has recalled 41 diplomats from New Delhi after India threatened to revoke their immunity. Foreign Minister Melanie Joly announced that 41 of Canada's 62 diplomats in India have been withdrawn. Canada has also temporarily suspended visa operations in its consulates in the Indian cities of Chandigarh, Bengaluru and Mumbai. US President Joe Biden called for increased spending to support both Israel and Ukraine. He drew parallels between the Hamas terrorist attack and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Biden seeks around $100 billion in emergency spending. At least $60 billion will be sent to Ukraine and $10 billion will be marked for Israel. The Pentagon says that a U.S. Navy warship intercepted cruise missiles and drones launched by Houthi rebels in Yemen. The Pentagon spokesperson said that the missiles were potentially aimed at Israel. The USS Carney, a destroyer, brought down the projectiles without causing injuries. Republican Party member Jim Jordan is suspending his bid for the U.S. House Speaker's position. He'll be supporting Republican Patrick McHenry temporarily. The House has been without a leader for over 2 weeks due to a lack of votes for Jordan. San Francisco police say that the man who intentionally crashed his car into the Chinese consulate earlier this month was armed. The attacker, who concealed a knife, made aggressive movements towards a police sergeant and a security guard. The sergeant shot and killed the suspect after he failed to comply with the officer's orders. Investigators are yet to determine the motive behind the attack. The U.S. Army has charged Private Travis King with desertion after he escaped to North Korea. The U.S. Army has leveled 8 charges against King, who was released by North Korea in September. Meanwhile, King's mother has requested for her son's presumption of innocence in a statement. Russian President Vladimir Putin visited a military command center in Russia's Rostov-on-Don earlier near the Ukraine border. Putin met with Russia's Chief of General Staff during the visit. Putin also oversaw Russia's war plans for the ongoing war in Ukraine. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met in Pyongyang yesterday. Kim reaffirmed his commitment to strengthen ties with Russia that he made during his meeting with Putin in September. The discussions between Kim and Lavrov included military cooperation, North Korea's satellite program, and the Ukraine war. The Taliban administration plans to formally join China's Belt and Road Initiative. Afghanistan's Commerce Minister says that they will send a technical team to China. Despite a lack of formal recognition, China is pursuing ties with the Taliban due to Afghanistan's valuable resources. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak met Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh. During their meeting, the Saudi Crown Prince condemned attacks on Gaza civilians. The two leaders underscored the need to avoid any further escalation in the region. Moving to updates from the Cricket World Cup. India beat Bangladesh by 7 wickets in yesterday's match at Pune. Bangladesh batted first and scored 256 runs for the loss of 8 wickets in their innings. The men in blue completed the run chase in the 41st over. India have won all 4 of their matches at the World Cup so far. Bangladesh batter Mushfiqur Rahim scored 38 runs in yesterday's match. With this performance, Rahim completed 1,000 runs in the ICC ODI World Cups. He's now only the second Bangladesh batter to achieve this milestone. Indian batter Virat Kohli was the highest scorer in yesterday's match. He was instrumental in India's successful chase, scoring an unbeaten century. This was Kohli's 48th ODI ton. He's now 1 century short of tying the record with Indian legend Sachin Tendulkar for the most ODI centuries. Indian wicketkeeper and batter KL Rahul said he urged Kohli to score a century and not take singles. In the post-match conference, Rahul said, and I quote, "Virat was confused when I refused to take a single and change strike. I told him to focus on his century because we were winning comfortably." Rahul remained unbeaten at the crease at 34 runs as Kohli smashed a 6 to lead India to victory. Indian captain Rohit Sharma gave India a solid start in yesterday's win against Bangladesh. Sharma was declared out as he fell just 2 runs shy of scoring a half-century. Now the Indian captain leads the rankings for top scorers at the World Cup. Rohit Sharma has scored 265 runs at the World Cup so far. He is followed by compatriot Virat Kohli, who has scored 259 runs. Indian bowler Jasprit Bumrah was crucial during the death overs against Bangladesh yesterday. The Indian pacer ended up taking 2 wickets to dismiss Bangladesh batters in quick succession. Bumrah has now taken 10 wickets and sits at second place at the highest world wicket-taker rankings at the World Cup. New Zealand spinner Mitchell Santner leads the bowlers with 11 wickets. Indian all-rounder Hardik Pandya suffered an injury during yesterday's match. Pandya was escorted off the field in just the 9th over of Bangladesh's batting. He was not seen for the rest of the match. Indian captain Rohit Sharma said that Pandya has suffered a twisted ankle. Pandya has been ruled out of India's game against New Zealand that's scheduled for Sunday. Australia play Pakistan in today's high-octane match in Bengaluru. After losing their first 2 matches, Australia need to win the match to stay in the race for the knockout stage. Meanwhile, Pakistan will look to bounce back from their defeat to India last week. England pacer Jofra Archer has arrived in India for the World Cup. He has joined the England team as a reserve and will be practicing in the nets today. The right-arm pacer cannot be included in the playing 11 at this point unless a player gets injured. Archer has joined the English side late after recovering from back and elbow injuries. Sri Lanka have announced that Angelo Matthews and Dushamantha Chamira will join as reserves. The 2 veterans are expected to join the team in the Indian city of Lucknow. Both Matthews and Chamira were last seen in action against Afghanistan in an ODI match in June. Sri Lanka next played the Netherlands in Lucknow tomorrow.